Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Crossover Talk Show. I'm your host, Travis Garrison, where we're talking sports and life. I got a very special guest with me today. I got Professor Dr. Brandon Wallace of Montgomery Community College. Man, like your resume is amazing. You authored a number of publications. You're on the board of at John Hopkins. You're the I want to say the Phi Delta Kappa chapter. You got the professor of the year 2020 at Bowie State. I mean, is your list of accomplishments is amazing, and it's always. And then I obviously read a little bit about what you do in regards to African American males and things of that nature. And man, it's impressive, and it's the stuff that you're doing, and your work is very important and vital, especially to the African American community. So, man.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. And I will, I'll tell my mom who wrote that bio. I'll tell her that. I'll tell her she did a good job.
She did a great job. She did a great job.
I will never come out, and she always comes through. Mom always comes through. No, I'm excited to be here for a lot of reasons. Number one, because I love what you all are doing. That's number one, and your show and your platform. And then I think that one of the things that we forget, especially in education, is the importance of athletics and the importance of sports. And so something that I've been off of for the past maybe 2 years is how do we get African-American males in particular who are basketball players, football players, baseball players at the community college or even collegiate level. How do we get them to become teachers? And I think that one of the things that I know that we're missing in public education, there's a lot of research that only about 2 or 3%, depending on what data you're looking at, about 2 or 3% of African-American males make up the teaching force in this country. And that is a disproportionate number. And so we need to increase the number of Black and brown men in classrooms. And so to connect with you and to almost like appeal to those of them who I understand that you have a passion for football, soccer, track and field and things like that. But we need you to get into the classroom. We need you to be first grade teachers, second grade teachers, third grade teachers, fourth grade teachers, because what the research does show is that when African-American students have African-American teachers, they improve in terms of graduation, retention, et cetera. And it doesn't only just help the African-American students, but it helps all the students involved in that classroom setting. And so this is a rare and cool opportunity for me to connect with your listeners who I'm begging. If you, and here's the thing, I don't want you to give up on your dream of becoming NBA All-Stars. I don't want you to give up on your dream of becoming NFL All. So if that does not work out for you, if it doesn't work out, come on and teach. Come on and teach. And you don't have to make it a lifelong thing. Even if it's just a year or two, maybe even 3 years. I was a teacher in Baltimore City Public School. I know we're going to get into a lot of stuff today, but I was a teacher in Baltimore City Public Schools, Chickapin Middle School and National Academy Foundation. And I knew that we needed African-American male teachers then. And I would groom or, kind of coach up a lot of my students who were lacrosse players and stuff like that to consider becoming a teacher. And I'm really proud that some of my African-American male students who were really big in athletics are now teachers. And so this is a great appeal and a great platform. So I'm glad to be here.
No, I'm glad to have you. I'm glad to have you. Like you said, it's an importance and it's a necessity. And the knowledge and the work that you're doing is important for people to understand. And like you said, some people are not knowledgeable or understand this or did their research or they kind of, I want to say, they're ignorant to the fact of what's going on. So what you about to share, what you're going to get into, I think is important. And going back to what you said in regards to athletes getting involved in the teaching, because that's similar kind of to what I've done, or the books I've written is based off my experiences in life, and not just in life but in sports. So I like I like my latest book. I basically drew a parallel line from like the court to life and how it is basically parallel, like in the sense of a lot of these tools that you learn through athletics you can use in life. And like you said, in regards to athletes getting these classrooms, they can help kids through what they've learned through sports, basically help them with education in regards to the example I give all the time is if you have a game on Friday, what are you going to do? You're going to practice almost every day for that game because you prep for the game. And then if you want to be, a great athlete, you're going to do what? You're going to put extra time in, you know, to prepare for that game on Friday. So when you go into the game on Friday, you're super confident and you're ready to go. Whereas if you don't practice or you don't prepare, then you're going to be, you get in there and you're nervous, you hesitating and you shy things that you're normally confident about. The same thing in school. Like if you have a test on Friday and you in class, you're going to go over what's the test is going to be all on Friday. But if you want to do great on that test, what you're going to do, you can put more time in. So it's like drawing, like what you're saying, like drawing those lines and basically comparing it to and like using those analogies, things that athletes can do. So man, that's great. Like I said, like I'm big on that. I'm huge. Like I said, I definitely appreciate the work that you're doing.
And I'm appreciating the work that you're doing. And it's interesting that you say, especially in your book right now, as you kind of like draw out this metaphor, this conceit, it's super important to understand that athletes make the best teachers. They understand cooperation, they understand communication, they understand hard work and work ethic, they understand what it takes to invest in time and planning and strategy. They understand that there's an end goal, an end game to where you have to take, you know, either the team, but more importantly, the classroom. And again, the fastest way to the middle class is like, you know, it really, it does frustrate me. And there's nothing wrong with gainful employment, any type of gainful employment. But when I see Black and brown men graduate from Bowie or Coppin or Morgan or wherever, Maryland or whatever, and they, you know, devoted X amount of years in sports, and then they kind of are shuffled into a system that they can't get into the middle class, they can't get a pension, they can't get, and so that's one of the fastest ways, especially in the state of Maryland, to get credentialed, to get seasoned, not to belabor the point about like what does it take to become a teacher, but all the things that you bring from sports are absolutely those power skills or soft skills that you need to translate into the classroom. And so how do you get 20, you know, 10-year-olds to get on the same page? It's like an organization, and you build, you know, morale. And it's a lot of different things that you do in athletics that absolutely corresponds and transcends into the classroom. And so and it's interesting because I talk to a lot of brothers, and a lot of people are like, you know, well, I wasn't good at calculus, or I wasn't good at, I'm like, I don't need you to teach calculus to these kids. These kids need, you know, like, you know, can you count to 10? Can you, like, can you make up a fun way to learn colors? Can you, you know, and it's about that impression also. So students need to see strong, good Black men who are supportive, who are caring, who are what I call warm demanders. So, you know, you love your students, but you have high expectations about their outcomes and their outputs, and no one understands that more than athletes. Nobody gets that better than athletes. And so again, this is a perfect platform, and the more and more we can have these types of discussions, these types of conversations about how to increase what we all need in our communities, what we all need in our neighborhoods, positive, not even, I don't want to say positive because positive kind of like, you know, conflates to, you know, there's a duality of positive and negative, but we just need more Black and brown men to show up in our communities. And this is one easy, good way. And teaching, you know, here's the thing, a lot of people, you don't make no money, and you know the kids are all this other stuff. I had a ball in Baltimore City. That's number one, and I taught in Baltimore City and Montgomery County, K through 12, and then of course I've taught, you know, at Hopkins, and I taught at PGCC, Prince George Community College, Montgomery College, as you said before, Bowie State. I taught as an adjunct. Teaching is an art. And the more you can practice it, and the more it literally is just like sports. I mean, when I talk about when you say like the metaphor that you're using, it's the perfect metaphor, especially when you're trying to recruit and retain really good Black and brown male educators.
No, absolutely. And going to back to the point that you mentioned in regards to athletes understand more, because like I said, going back to how I use it is, you know, I had a number of coaches throughout my playing career. You know, some coaches are better than others, and the way they taught and the way they taught, like one of my high school coach was a Hall of Famer, but he was a great basketball coach, but he was a bigger in regards to teaching about life. And he always would give a quote at the beginning of practice, and from whether it's Churchill, like all these different philosophers or people in regards to about life, and then at the end of practice, he'll come back and ask us to repeat the quote, and then what does it mean to us? So he's always was teaching us about life through basketball, and it was amazing how he did it. And a lot of those tools I still use today. But also seeing how a positive coach can affect players compared to a bad coach that can affect players. So that's what you're saying in regards to we teaching these kids. We understand what works better for individual kids, just like how a coach would know a good coach would know how to coach each player in the sense of, okay, I know this player, he might not take how I come at him this way, so let me come at him this way. The same with kids. Kids, every kid is different from whatever reason, whether it's their background, their family life, whatever it is. So you have to. It takes patience.
Yep.
It takes, and I'm going to get into that. Like it takes patience and it takes understanding, and it takes. You have to want to help the kids instead of like looking at it like, oh, it's just a job. Let me have to get through this. If I can go back home, I mean, it takes us, like you said, a certain set of. I mean, I salute teachers the most, and people talk about it all the time, and it's a serious thing. It's like underpaid because of what you do. You're in the sense of you're not a lot of times the most love and care kids get sometimes are from teachers. I mean, they spend most of the day with these kids. So sometimes parents are like, I'm just gonna drop my kid off just to get them on my hair and move on. Like, so a lot of times kids are coming in and that's the love that they're getting, where they're not getting at home. Yep. So, the teachers are underpaid. I say that the teachers should be one of the highest paid jobs out there because of what they do. And then it's like, if you're not paid right, or you feel like you're not appreciated, sometimes you don't you're not motivated to do the work. And it takes a lot of work to work with these different kids from different backgrounds, as I know you've seen, especially like in the Baltimore area. So what made you want to get into education and do all the amazing things that you're doing? Like, what was I know some people were like, well, when I was a kid, my mom did this, or I saw this, or this would help me through my life. What was your reason why?
So it's interesting you say that, because a lot of people have that story, especially educators, when it's like, a third grade teacher changed my life, or a fifth grade teacher changed my life. I'm gonna be honest with you. I was the worst student. So I'm a product of gorgeous Prince George's public school system. So I went to a pretty, back in the day, it wasn't the best high school. It was Fairmont Heights High School back in the day.
I know Fairmont.
You know Fairmont Heights? Okay. So I'm not going to tell you when I graduated, but I went to Fairmont Heights, but it was on 1401 Nye Street back in those days, back in Heights days. Yeah. And I'll say all that to say, I had a blast in high school, but if I asked anybody, if I go up to anybody, even to this day, I say, I'm a teacher, their jaws drop. They just don't believe it, because I was the worst student. I was the worst student. I would skip class. I would be at Landover Mall, not doing what I'm. This is when this is old Prince George's County. There's no New Carrollton Mall anymore. There's no Landover Mall. That's how old I am. But we used to skip school. We used to go to Adventure World, which is now Six Flags. Always, just bad student behavior. Then I graduated, and the only reason why I went to college is because I had friends around me who were going to college. I thought that I was going to stay at Walter Reed Army Medical Center, move up the GS ladder. I had no real ambition of going to college. My friends who were around me were applying to schools, and I was just like, oh, I probably should be applying to schools too. Graduated from Bowie State University and didn't really map out a plan. I was thinking about law. I was thinking about law. And then I had a really great friend. Her name was Erica Barnett. She called me, and she was a teacher. We were students, English majors together at Bowie State University. And to make a really long story short, Erica Barnett called me and she said, have you ever wanted to teach? And I said, no. And then she was like, have you ever wanted to teach, in, communities of color? I was like, hell no. And she's like, so she was already in Baltimore City. And she was like, Brandon, I want you to apply to become a teacher in Baltimore. I had no real next steps or no real next plans. So it wasn't a long dream. I don't have that story like a fifth grade teacher changed my life. But I had a friend, Erica Barnett, who said, you would be a great teacher. I applied for something called the Baltimore City Teaching Residency Program. And a lot of people don't understand this part about education. I was not an education major. I was an English major. And so it was a very broad general degree. And so I got my teaching credentials going into an alternative teacher certification, initiative. And
Right.
so just because you're a communications major or an English major or a business major, you could still be a teacher. You could absolutely still be a teacher. There's always ways to fast track your teaching credentials. And then I started in Baltimore City Public Schools at Chincopen Middle School, Title I Middle School in the east side of Baltimore City. And I hated it every single day. Every single day I was quitting. I was just like, this job is the worst job. Nobody's really trying to help me. I can't figure it out. I don't know how to lesson plan. I don't know how to pace my lessons. Every single day for about a month, I quit every single day.
Right.
But to your point, and very analogous to athleticism, you can't win every game, right?
Right.
Like
right.
some games you're going to lose. Sometimes you're not on a winning streak, and you still have to press your way every single day, commit yourself to the higher calling of what you're there for, and hope that it all works out for the best. And so a lot of praying, a lot of tears, a lot of praying, a lot of tears, a lot of praying, a lot of tears, and disciplining myself to wake up every single day and give it my best kind of ushered me into becoming a public school teacher. And then after about 2 months, loved it. Fell in love with the students, fell in love with the content. Then I figured out what I was supposed to be doing all day with these students, like skill building, teaching them how to speak, teaching them how to listen, teaching them how to write, things like that. And then the rest is really history. I went from teaching at middle school to immediately going into the National Academy Foundation School 421 on the east side also. And then I was kind of department chairperson at NAF, wrote curricula for Baltimore City Public Schools, worked for the central office. And I think that that's one thing also, even though I didn't have an initial why, it was just like a phone call that came through. Right. It doesn't always have to be, you're a second grade teacher saved your life because you were drowning. It could just be like, hey, I kind of like fell into it and now I'm in love with it. And so I want to kind of like impress upon your listeners, your audience members, that sometimes you don't always have that, heartstring warm story that kind of compels people to tears. Sometimes it's like, I got a phone call. It was just like, come up and teach. And so that was the beginnings of me becoming an educator, especially in Baltimore City.
Wow, and it led you down. It led you down an amazing path and accomplished amazing things. I know one thing, you did a dissertation on African American males learning through COVID-19. Tell me about that. I'm curious about that because I have kids, and I know during the pandemic, it was learning online. You had the learning online and that whole process. You talking about kids that can't stay focused, and the parents are the teachers now, and that was a crazy time, and I'm pretty sure a lot of it slowed down the process for a lot of kids that may have disabilities or just struggle in school normally, and then you talk about 2 years, of basically learning online or away from the actual classroom. So what made you do this dissertation, and tell us a little bit about it.
So what made me do the dissertation is the dissertation is, it was a very personal yet unbiased approach to understanding successful African-American males. And so I kind of got tired, as we all do, get tired of the meta narrative of like, Black men aren't succeeding. They're not graduating from this. They're horrible. They're not good at reading. They're not good. And so I wanted to showcase African-American males who actually were successful, who had come out of COVID with sometimes even 2 degrees, 4.0s, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I did a qualitative study, narrative inquiry study, based upon 6 African-American males. And I decided to, as pseudonyms, I'm not sure if you all remember Gina 6, but I used the Gina 6 names. So 6 men from Gina, Louisiana that were unjustly prosecuted and convicted of a crime, and their punishment was absolutely horrific, but it underscores what happens in legal systems for Black men. So I use them as pseudonyms, if you will, their names, Jesse, Brian, etc. And I wanted to study African-American males who have been successful in COVID. And a lot of their stories are empathic love notes, really, that makes you want to put yourself in the shoes of these Black men who have been successful. It has not been easy for anybody in COVID, but more importantly, if there's a will and a drive, and there's even a sensation of perseverance, you're going to be able to do the things that you didn't think you would be able to do. And this is, again, just like sports, right? Like you have a lot of underdogs that you never think they're going to win anything. And then they come out of the gate and they kind of take it all. And so I was interested in studying successful African-American males. That's number one. Number two, I was interested in capturing their stories, because so oftentimes there aren't a lot of platforms like this where Black men are sharing in a very truth dense way their experiences, and people are actually like listening, and people are actually like taking notes and doing things with the data that they've collected. And so I wanted to make sure that I codify what success looked like for African-American males, but also kind of pieced apart their stories to figure out what are the things that African-American males need, especially the ones that I was interviewing. What are the things that they need in order to be successful, so that we can pass that information along? And so one of the things that I really was interested in was, how did you make it? And was it all bad or was it all good? What were some of the supports or some of the barriers that either helped or hurt your progression? And so a lot of that was some of the students really enjoyed actually going online, because they didn't have a lot of positive classroom experiences. And so let's be clear, right? Like school wasn't working before COVID. Before COVID. And so during COVID, it really exposed a lot of problems and issues that we've had in public education for many, many years. And I think that parents probably have a deeper appreciation for teachers. And I think that teachers probably have a deeper appreciation for themselves and their time now. And so I think that in as much as COVID is absolutely horrible in terms of the amount of deaths that we've experienced and the sicknesses and a lot of the long existing conditions that a lot of our human partners in this world have now, I think there are some good things that came out of COVID, because it illuminated, right? It illuminated ways in which we can offer education differently. It also illuminated accountability measures that we have to start putting in place to help all of our students learn. And then more important, I think another big piece of learning through COVID is that you got to be flexible. So oftentimes it was like 30 kids in a classroom, Scantron test, you're bubbling it, and that kind of educational system, it cannot work anymore. It does not work. It wasn't working before, it isn't working now, and it won't work in the future. And so we have to become a lot more technology savvy, a lot more adaptable, a lot more creative, a lot more imaginative of what education could look like. And so to your point, I know a lot of people suffered and got a lot of pained, if you will, in this whole COVID era. But I think that it's brought a lot of recreating systems that were broken, and even revolutionizing systems that we know just won't work anymore.
Absolutely. No, I definitely agree with that. And like you said, a crazy amount of deaths, illness, a lot of things that happen during COVID. But like you said, it basically spotlight these areas or different things, what work, what don't work, because you had to adjust, and you seen things differently. Like I said, parents appreciate teachers more. I know I did, for sure. I was like, man, because at one point I was like, it'd be cool, maybe it'd be cool, to have my kids do homeschooling. Because like sometimes, like you said, sometimes the classroom is not for everybody. There's so much going on in these schools.
Yeah.
But then you see that, and you're like, how sometimes it's not until you actually go through something. Like one time I wanted to try boxing. And then when I actually got in there and I started training, I'm like, because I used to watch boxing matches, and I'm like, why are they not throwing all these punches? So why are they doing all this and that? And then I get in, I'm training, I'm like, man, I don't understand. Same thing with teachers, parents and teachers. Parents are looking at it like, man, I appreciate these teachers a lot more if you didn't appreciate them before.
That's right.
So going to that point, it was an unfortunate situation, but it highlighted so many different areas and things that's going on in our world and in our systems and all over the place. So it was, take your good with your bad type situation,
Yeah. And I think that another part of that is the appreciation factor, absolutely. But I also think that there was a realization of how much teachers work, how hard they have to work in order to manage 30 kids learning at different levels, trying to organize, that is a very different difficult skill. And that's again, I'm going to keep on underscoring this point. This is why athletes would make the best teachers, because you're already kind of immersed into a group experience, right? And you have to kind of figure out, what is my part in this system? What is my part? And how do I improve whatever we're supposed to be doing for the team, for the whatever, this and that. And so I think that a lot of folks appreciate the hard work and the ethic, but also a lot of folks are starting to realize that teaching is not only a practice of, skill-based knowledge where you understand the style and the study of, pedagogy and education and teaching and instruction, but it's also a way to build community, build relationships, understand diversity and inclusivity. And I think that there's a lot of skills that students even and parents of those students now understand that teachers have skills that they probably never thought that was almost like a requirement for teaching. But now we understand that it absolutely isn't. To your point about pay, I think that there's a lot of interesting ideas of why teacher pay is so low. Teaching in this country is typically seen as like a woman's profession, right? Because there's a lot more females dominating the K through 12 teaching space than males. That's number one. But the bigger point to that is that the value of women is so, if you will, undervalued, to where that the society that we live in doesn't mind underpaying women in particular, because they're already underpaid when it comes to men and women and, stuff like that. So there's a lot of conjecture of why educators don't make as much money as as we all know that they should. But again, I can't underscore this enough. I got my master's degree from Johns Hopkins University. Baltimore City public school system paid for 75% of the masters. And so I only had to kick out maybe and I know it's very vulgar to talk about money, but I'm going to be vulgar. I'm going to be vulgar right now. What a vulgar conversation having. But I only had to kick out about $5,000 or $6,000 for a master's degree from Johns Hopkins University. Wow. And so even in as much as, I wasn't making, six figures as a teacher, I was taking advantage of a lot of programmatic supports to help me increase my earnings by getting a heavily discounted master's degree, or some of the best healthcare my copays were like $5 at best. Wow. And so again, there's a lot of things that you have to take into in terms of a package when you think about becoming a teacher, especially right now in this country.
Absolutely. No, that's amazing. And you're absolutely right. All these, it's how you understand things, and the knowledge that you're given is a necessity and is needed. And people need to understand that. People don't understand it. They don't think about it sometimes until they actually hear these conversations, like you're saying. So the work I continue to say it, the work you're doing is amazing, and it's needed. And as well as I know you did some work with the national assessments, and you was ensuring that they are written with cultural perspectives.
Yeah.
Like I said, amazing work that you're doing, but wait, get into that. Talk a little bit about that.
So it's funny because a lot of people don't. So a few things. So I was on the initial inception and a writer for probably 5 or 6 years for PARC, the Partnership for the Assessment for Readiness for College and Career, PARC. Mm-hmm. And so PARC was a test that DC, one of those standardized tests that DC took, Maryland took, a lot of places did PARC. I was behind that test. I do a lot of work with GED. I do a lot of work with NAEP, the National Assessment for Educational Progress, the nation's report card. And so I'm the guy that writes the test. I'm the guy that, I know.
You're the guy.
I
know. My daughter just did PARC last Sunday too. So I'm going to say, look, I just talked to the guy that made you. My daughter was so mad. She was so scared. She was so scared of it. She was didn't want to do it because she was so fearful of it. And so go ahead. I'm gonna let you go ahead.
No, it's funny. So I know we're not gonna. We just don't have enough time to get into all of it. But I will say this: unfortunately, the assessments. I'm so glad you said that your daughter was fearful of it. I'm gonna tell you where that fear comes from. The fear comes from a lot of adults around her saying how scary the test is, and that's that kind of vicarious fear or vicarious trauma, that third party trauma or third party fear, comes from a not so great place. And so I try to always laud, praise where educational assessments are going, but more importantly, underscoring that tests, especially the ones that I build, that I create, they cannot be the end all be all. Anybody who writes tests knows that that is one single datum point that you have to assess a student. So you need project-based learning, you need experiential learning, you need a lot of like a bricolage of things coming together to say, this is why this student is superior. This is why this student is above average. This is why this student is average. And right. So no one who writes tests would say like a singular test can assess a student's mentality or, you know, smartness, if you will. And I'll say all that to say, when I first started the National Assessment Rodeo, I was the only, you know, a lot of folks, sometimes folks like to be the first, right? The first African-American male or the only African, that's a very lonely place to be, especially in education. And so in as much as I understand that I am typically the first or the only, it's not the best place for me to be. And so I have to show up as my whole self, as authentically as I can, as loud as I want to be, as who I am, and just kind of own my space in the room. And so being a person of color, being a millennial, and having done, to your point, a lot of things over the years, I know that I have a responsibility when I get into those rooms to say, like, this is absolutely culturally biased, because students wouldn't know what an atrium is, or how do we know that all students have driveways? How do we know that all, so, you know, we have to kind of like make the tests a lot more inclusive. And so one of the things that I've been doing for probably well over 10 years is working with ETS, GED, PARC, the multi-state alternate assessment, which was a assessment for students with severe or profound cognitive disabilities. I've been making my mark in that space because, number one, I know that the kids got to take the test. That's number one. And I would love for us to enter into a space where there were no, you know, sit and get tests. You know, if we can just go back to MISPAP or go back to more project-based, I would love that, but we're not there yet. And so while we're here, you know, we can either reform or revolutionize. I would love to revolutionize, but I understand that reform is the power that I have right now. And so in these systems that are seemingly broken, how can my voice or my pen add to the richness and the wealth to make it a little bit more equitable? And so I do that national assessment work, and I've been doing that work for over a decade now, because it's really important that when tests get in front of Black and brown kids, they have just as much of a fair chance to show their cognitive ability, not their ability if they understand context, when it comes to like vocabulary that they've never understood or never learned or never were exposed to, et cetera. And so that's a lot of the work that I do as a consultant under Wallace Education Enterprises. And I've been proud of that work. And again, whenever, to your point, whenever it's teachers, especially, when they figure me out, they're just like, you're the guy, you're the one. And, but it starts there, but then it also, it transitions into, let me show you how to answer this question. Let me show you how to like understand these distractors, there could only be one answer. This key is the right answer because these distractors aren't plausible. They might be sexy, like you might be driven to them, but there's no way that this could have been the answer. And so let's like unpack it. Let me show you my thinking. That's what we call metacognition. And so it's an important tool. But again, I get that reaction all the time from young students and teachers, but then it does transition into a much more pleasurable discourse when I'm saying like, you know, I'm on y'all's side. I really am on y'all's side. So you always have that.
No, and I know you talked about it in regards to, you know, the nature of instructional measures for Black and brown students. And so obviously I took the SATs when I was in high school, and like the high school I went to, we had a teacher that taught the prep classes. So I was fortunate enough to have to go through the prep classes, and we, you know, she gave us a number of SAT tests that we actually had to take ourselves, and she gave us the breakdowns of, you know, don't look at these questions as like this has to be the answer, because it's the way it's worded and it's similar words, and And honestly, I was like, man, what's the point of this? I'm like, man, what's the point of this? And like, I'm like, then like you said, going back, some people students didn't have the opportunity to get these classes like I did, and it's, unfortunately some of these kids were the athletes too, they don't go to these major colleges because they couldn't get the SAT score. Because so what are we testing? What are we showing? Then like you're saying, based on different backgrounds and upbringing, some of these kids may not have heard this or seen this or had this. So who are we really, who's the test really for? You know what I mean? So it's like, so that's from my understanding as a parent and as a former, student having to go through this whole process. My understanding of, some people, like you said, have better opportunities and privileges because of the opportunity they may have had to have these prep classes or to have these tutors or to have this background of these educational parents that brought them up. So they was forced to read books, or some kids not going through that and dealing with that, or so they could be smart and super intelligent, but don't have the opportunity because of certain tests or things that basically said, oh, well, you're not smart enough, but based off this assessment. Yeah. So we need, like you said, you're an important person in the sense of, because you're a Black, brown person, in the sense of your background, and because you can relate to them, because of, working in Baltimore City, been in touch with these, where some people of other color or backgrounds may not understand because they wasn't brought up into it. So it's like you have to, like, your voice is needed in these rooms, a necessity because of what you bring to the table.
Yeah. And it's funny because you're 100% right. I bring all of me to the table. And so I'm the middle of 7 kids. I grew up, my mom was a single parent. My mom and my dad had 7 kids, and I'm the middle. And my dad was an abusive alcoholic who was a light switch in and out of our lives. My mother had to move us to the projects double time. So I lived in Glade Street projects and Eastern Circle projects, scrapping and fighting and all this other fun stuff. But we all have that story. Like, we all have those stories. And so I try not to get fixated on the poverty piece, but I try to get fixated on, why did I have to experience that and how can I apply that today? And so I could sit with the whole, woe is me, and I didn't have a great childhood. Like, nobody had a great childhood. Like, we all had problems in our childhood. But it's just like, what God has allowed me to go through then, how can I apply it now? And so now I think about my own upbringing and living in the projects and not knowing what a solarium is. Like, I didn't know what a sunroom is then. I know what it is now, but I can't write a test that says, Baldwin pianos or solariums or sunrooms, because I would have never have understood. It wouldn't even make sense. There's an extra room in your house that is unutilized, that just has like that doesn't even make sense when you're growing up in a project, right? Exactly. And so I bring my whole self. That's what I really mean when I was talking about bring my whole self. I do bring the Blackness, the maleness, and all these other things that I have, but I also bring my history. And I think that especially when you bring that to the table, and when you bring it to the table, it makes things better. I'll just end at this point. You have a really good point that you made about you were able to go to like a preparation class to help you with your SAT assessment. And we'll talk about SAT. If you really study that assessment, it really traditionally is a white male test. And so the SATs initially, when the SATs was the first, like in its first iteration, it was really used for private boarding schools for white men in the northeast part of the country. And so it was a placement test, like, where do you place in the school that you've already been paying to get? So private school, white men, northeast, that's where the test comes from. Just like education in this country, it was never intended for Black people to be educated in this country. It was never intended for Black people to have to take the SAT. It was never normed in those days for diversity or inclusivity and things like that. Now we're getting better, especially with the work that I'm doing with NAEP and other things like that. But I'll say all that to say, when you have a class like the one you were able to take advantage of in high school to prepare you for the SAT, you start to learn, like, a lot of our students, they're not taught test taking skills. And that's what the test is. The test is measuring, it does measure, your mathematic ability, your ability to read and, synthesize information, analyze stuff like that. But it really is it harbors on you being able to take a test, like you having the skills to take a test. And so one of the ways that I think about the lack of preparation, especially for Black and brown communities, is number one, a lot of folks don't have that preparation class. That's number one. But number two, a lot of teachers aren't teaching approximation, which is an amazingly important test taking skill. And so, for instance, as Black and brown students matriculate through systems of education, we're often told we got to be triple better than everybody. We got to be twice as good. We got to da 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 da. Then it starts playing with your psyche that I have to get the right answer, the best perfect answer. I have to get it down to the right, like everything has to be perfect because I have to be better than everybody else.
Right.
That's not what really good test takers understand. Good test takers understand approximation. And so while you have the little Black boy, right, like Brandon, who is struggling with 98.48232 times 1.9987876, the smart Brandon is looking at the 98 point, all these other numbers, and the 1.9, all these other numbers. And I'm trying to figure out how to multiply the tens places and that. But the better test taker says, what's 98.987? That's 100. 98 point, all that, that's 100. What's 1.9987? That's 2. That's just 2. I'm going to just approximate. I'm going to get to that number. So now I have 100 times 2, 200. Right there, just that quick. Now I'm going to look at A, B, C, D. Which one is closer to that 200? That's the right answer. That's the right. But we run out of time, right? Brandon runs out because I'm sitting here trying to get when you don't do that. You don't do that when you're taking a test. And so again, it's can you get into these preparation classes, of course, and can you get test taking skills under your belt to make you successful? And approximation is one of the things that I don't get taught that much, especially in public schools, and that we need to experience so that we're better test takers, but more importantly, better thinkers, faster thinkers, stuff like that.
Right. Yeah, that's definitely, like I said, you're needed. You're needed, and we can literally have this conversation for hours because just off my curiosity, and I'm pretty sure other audience out there and parents are curious about these things as well. So how can people know more and find out more, or bring Professor Brandon Wallace to them speak? I know you do speaking as well, a great speaker. So how can they get more information about you, your work? How can they get in touch with you, like your contact information?
I appreciate that. So I'm pretty accessible on Instagram, Twitter. I think I'm all B as in Brandon, S as in Stephen, C as in Charles, Wallace, Wallace. But here's my Gmail. If you ever wanted to email me, it's B as in Brandon, S as in Stephen, C as in Charles, Wallace, Wallace @gmail.com. I'm pretty accessible. I know that, sometimes folks, when we first started, do you call me doctor? You call me professor? I'm just Brandon. I'm I'm blessed.
Hey,
God has blessed me.
Some people are really,
I know.
really,
No, I know.
really,
I know.
I'm doctor. I earned it. Call me doctor.
That's right. I know. There are some people like that, but I'm just blessed that I've had a lot of good opportunities, and I've been able to help and advocate for a lot of parents and students with disabilities, and just all, just a litany of people over the years. But go ahead and send me an email at bscwallace@gmail.com, bscwallace@gmail.com. I'm on Twitter, I'm on Instagram, and I'm also Brandon C.S. Wallace, BRANDON C.S. Wallace, WALACE, on LinkedIn. You get me on LinkedIn. But I'd be excited to talk to anybody who wants to partner, to share, to think. And then Wallace Education Enterprises is always open for business. No new business for the summer, but and I got some trips I'm trying to get on. But I'm excited to continue this work and improve the educational systems wherein we find ourselves and wherein we find a lot of students that look like us.
Absolutely. Like I said, amazing. I definitely appreciate your time because I know you're busy. You got a lot going on. So I definitely appreciate you joining the Crossover Talk Show with me, your host, Travis Garrison. You got Mr. Brandon Wallace that's doing great things in the community and for these Black and brown individuals and for people, period. So I definitely appreciate your time and your knowledge. and continue to do what you're doing. You definitely appreciate it. You know, I don't even know you personally, but after all the work that you're doing, I think is amazing, and definitely keep going because I know it's not easy, but I know it's a necessity. And, you know, like you said, God put you in that position for a reason. So continue to utilize those skills and that knowledge.
No, I thank you so much for having me. Thanks for letting me be a part of this show. And I'm looking forward to coming back. I want to come back so we can have some more conversations. There's much to talk about and much to solve, especially for our communities of color, for sure.
Absolutely. Absolutely.